And maybe we'll go through with just a brief introduction, starting with Sarah.
Hi everyone, so my name's Sarah Kirk. I'm a Professor of Health Promotion in Health and Human Performance Faculty of Health, and also the Scientific Director of the Healthy Populations Institute. I'm really happy to be here actually, and I'm going to talk about my research program. And actually the two of my first collaborators are on this call, which is Megan and Sherry.
That's great, thanks Sarah. Sherry, would you like to introduce yourself next?
Sure, my name is Sherry Lynn Price, and I'm an associate professor at the School of Nursing. I am a 3-time graduate from Dalhousie University, and it's always exciting to be invited back to share that whole journey of coming on as faculty. And it's funny because as I was thinking about what I was going to present today, Sarah and Megan were top of mind as well. So it is a lot about the relationships that you build. So I look forward to talking with you guys today.
Great. Thanks, Sherry. And Grace.
Hi, I'm Grace Warner. I'm a professor in the School of Occupational Therapy, but I always kind of give a little caveat there because I'm not an occupational therapist. I'm actually an epidemiologist, and knowledge translation is in my postdoctoral work. Yeah, it's good to meet everyone. I'm looking forward to it. My research is what I would call is applied health services research, and mostly about implementation science and community-based services for older adults. So nice to see everybody here. Nice to see a lot of familiar faces, which is a lot of fun.
Great, thanks Grace. So now for the next section, if each of the panelists would like to take a few minutes, about 5 to 7 minutes, and just share your journey, your experience, and some lessons learned for the early career researchers on the call. And Sarah, if you'd like to kick it off, that would be great.
Yeah, thank you. So thanks for joining us today. It's great to see so many people, and as Grace mentioned, some familiar faces as well. So I'm going to give a little bit about my journey, which has it started 14 years ago almost, or maybe already, I can't remember if it's 13 or 14. And I came to Canada. I came to DAL as a Canada Research Chair. So essentially I had a funded position from the federal government, which was an amazing thing to have, which I ended up holding for 10 years. It was a tier 2, which means you have sort of 5 and 5 renewable. So having a plan for me was really, really important, because I was actually 3,000 miles away in the UK, trying to kind of get a sense of this whole new environment that I was working in. So it's kind of quite challenging to really think about, like, what did I want to do? I didn't even know what was happening at DAL at the time. So for me, I had a really clear plan as to what and I had to do that for my Canada Research Chair anyway. And often you have to do that. If you're applying for a tenure-track position, you often do have to outline your research plan. But I was able to come over to DAL for on a couple of occasions, and as I mentioned earlier, the 2 people that I was able to connect with when I was there, Sherry was I think the first, and I also was introduced to Megan, and a few other people from across the campus, which enabled me to sort of learn a little bit about what other people were doing, and look at how my research might fit within that. So my research is really around creating supportive environments for chronic disease prevention. So recognizing there's multiple things that stop us from doing things that we know are good for our health and well-being, like eating healthy, being physically active, sleeping, etc. And so understanding how that environment impacts us is really important. And I also had a very particular interest at the time around obesity management and prevention as a condition which is often very stigmatized and also very much considered to be, you just need to eat less and move more and you'll be fine. But we know that the environment is preventing us from doing that. So that's where I came from in terms of my research interest. It was actually relatively easy for me to set up a research program in that area, because there was actually nobody else that I was aware of at DAL who was doing what I was really interested in doing. So I kind of was able to really carve my own niche area and build on that. So of course, when you are building your research program, you're really looking at it from the perspective of doing something that isn't independent, that this kind of defines you. But that doesn't mean that it can't be collaborative. So like Grace, I do a lot of collaborative applied research. In fact, my research group that I had when I was working in the Canada Research Chair was called Applied Research Collaborations for Health, or ARCH, because I recognized that the changing some of those things that are influencing people's health behaviors is not just about my background or my discipline. It was about working collaboratively with stakeholders, with policymakers, etc. And that can be sometimes a little bit daunting. It takes a ton of time. If I look back on my kind of trajectory now, and I think, some of the work that I'm doing now, which is highly complex sort of systems change kind of pieces, I would never have done as a tenure track, because I can't publish. It takes weeks, months, years to build a relationship and do some of that work. So you have to sort of really focus your research on something that is very much around you, your background, but also align it with what other people are doing in your field and in your kind of immediate sort of environment. But it is still important to have a clear plan, and not just for your research plan, but also to think about how that fits into all the other things that academics do in their careers. So I think the best advice I got at the early stage of my career was to review the tenure and promotion requirements really just as soon as you get your tenure track position, and look very closely at sort of, what is it I'm going to be judged on over the next, when I come to that point in my career. So it might be a few years away, but don't feel that you can't actually start to plan right now, and have yourself a little kind of master table where you have teaching, research, and service, and start looking at what would be the things that I would want to be doing in each of those areas that would enable me to be a strong candidate for tenure and promotion. I'm just conscious of the time. I just want to finish up with a couple of other things around that. So if you know what the tenure and promotion requirements are, you can negotiate a workload that will help to align with that, because obviously that's a very key thing to be doing as well. And then you can set goals for each. So not just your research, but setting goals for each of those. The other great piece of advice I got was to start small and apply often when it came to grants. So look for those small pots of money. Often that's internal money within the faculty or within the university, and apply for those things. It gets you into the swing of actually being, submitting grants. Take rejection well. It'll happen throughout your career that you will be rejected, but take that as a learning opportunity to move it forward. Get a mentor if you can, somebody you respect. When you have got your team, I haven't even got to that sort of question, but when you do have a team, make sure that there are clear goals for you as an independent researcher and for your team, and make sure that you have regular check-ins. I'm going to stop there and pass it on, I think it's Sherry maybe next. Thanks.
Great. Thanks, Sarah. Yeah, Sherry, if you want to take it from there. Thanks.
I realize there's probably going to be considerable overlap, so I rejigged some of my thoughts as Sarah was speaking. But I think for me, one of the things that I tell my graduate students is that when you're doing your dissertation or your thesis, that is not your life. That is a project. And for me, that was so true, because I had to think of it as a launching pad for what I would eventually do. So I started out looking at socialization among nurses.
I've lost audio. I'm wondering,
Sherry, your audio's cut out on us. I think she might have signed out and signed back in. Maybe, do we want to go to Grace and then we can come back to Sherry once she comes back on? If that...
Yeah, that's fine with me if it works for you.
Thanks, Grace.
Yeah, no problem. Okay, well, I feel like there's going to be a lot of repetition here with Sherry and Sarah and I in regards to that we all have kind of a very applied, collaborative way of doing our research. And for me, that means there's a lot of participatory work. So I think I will key in on the fact that, working with partners, which is a huge part of my work, is developing partnerships, especially with Nova Scotia Health. And then more recently, as we've come into the era of patient-oriented research, developing partnerships and relationships with our patient family advisors. So the relationships are key to success. I do work on a lot of collaborative teams. And I think that one of my areas is that I wouldn't say I was as organized as Sarah. I was a bit stubborn. I kind of came into this kind of a bit older with my PhD, and I was not as flexible as I probably should have been. So I would recommend people be fairly flexible and start on those smaller grants, as Sarah said, and try to build the relationships with those you trust and respect. So I think that the respect word has become very important to me, especially when working with other individuals which are non-academics. So respect for the knowledge of health services, health, I see your notes, Sarah, so I don't know, you seem a lot more organized. But anyway, so I'm just trying to say that sometimes even if you're not organized, you can still be successful and you can still make it happen. So I think that I do try to, there are people that I work with, whenever they ask me something, I will always do it because I respect them. And there are other people maybe I don't work as well with, and so I try not to work with those. And that's okay too. It doesn't mean they aren't good researchers. It just means that we find the group where we can work well together as a team, and we find our own different areas of research. So for example, I am a methodologist, so I often work on the methodology for a grant. I'm also very interested in implementation science. So I may bring that view in terms of the science of the models. So where can I bring this to either lead or participate in a team? And where can I kind of find those? And I think finding those teams where you can find your niche and where you can have publications out of that, or you can have, for example, if you're working with teams outside the province, where can you share money? And that brings that into it. So it's often looking at, what can I get out of this team? What can I learn? What can I bring to it? And, and I try to make sure that I am, find publications. So I'm working in a team, I try to find an area that I can find my own little niche where I can bring something else and then find a publication out of that. And some of the key areas about teams, I think one of the things is those working relationships that people have said, but also I find like working with research assistants is actually kind of finding that right balance, because I do like people to work independently. I do respect what they're bringing, but then you have to also really make sure that you monitor and touch in frequently, because sometimes I've had really good researchers, research assistants, but they go off on a tangent and then they don't touch base, and then they're off doing something that may not be exactly what the grant needs. So really that, if you may hear in the background, I have a dog, so the dog's barking. So these are some of the things that you may think about. And I would say the research coordinators are wonderful. Having a good research coordinator allows you to do less administrative work. And for me, the passion of doing research is doing the research. So I'd love, being part of teams where I can actually do the interviews, where I can, if I'm feel like it, doing analysis if I want. And then maybe not having those administrative duties of budget, and also kind of organizing when meetings are going to happen or setting up Zoom meetings. So I think when you have the money to have a coordinator, that to me is the beauty of a larger grant, is to be able to have that coordination. I'm just going to take a last look. I think those are my key points. Yes, my key points. So I'm going to turn over, maybe Sherry is back by now, and so I can turn over to her.
How's the audio now?
That's great. Yeah, thanks, Sherry.
Okay, well, I feel bad. I missed most of what Grace covered. So if I repeat some of what Grace shared, yeah, I think the first point I was starting with was that I remember someone telling me that your dissertation or your thesis work is not your entire life work. It's a launching pad. And I think that when I came to Dalhousie, that was forefront in my mind of, how can this jumpstart me in different areas? And I thought about what I wanted to share with you today. And I had 3 words that I wanted to discuss. And the first is funding. I truly believe, and I heard the last of what Grace was saying, and also Sarah shared the fact that funding, even small amounts, it's so critical. So I came in the door and I applied for everything, everywhere I could. And I thought creatively about, what did I already have in the context of data or a story that I needed to tell? And I had my PhD work. So I started with dissemination opportunities to disseminate that work and knowledge translation and getting some small grants, and then getting a $5,000 grant that was internal to just be a pilot for my first CIHR grant. And funding, really, success begets success. The more funding you have, the more funding you will get. And I think that being able to, for instance, work with Megan and Sarah, who are mentors of mine and also friends, but and that's why mentors are so key, is that, for instance, Sarah and I and Megan were on a grant together, but I had this idea of how I wanted to take our findings and disseminate them. And Sarah let me be the lead on that, the nominated PI. And then that actually, it was my idea, but it's working with the other people. And it was an idea that we actually collectively came up with, but it was an opportunity for me to get CIHR funding as a nominated PI on a small $10,000 dissemination grant. But that really, again, helped me get my first CIHR grant for my projects that looked at interprofessional collaboration. So funding is really critical. So I put a lot of energy into applying for everything I could, everywhere I could, because you really can't do anything without it, and even small amounts of money, because then you have the data, then you have something you can write about and you can present at conferences. The other thing I wanted to share had to do with fit. And I remember, again, my PhD supervisor said to me, start to think about who might share your ideas, but they might be slightly different. But for instance, I was interested in interprofessional socialization and professional socialization. And then I started to think about, the nurses own professional socialization. So I should be partnering with other health professional groups to find out what they do in this area. And then I built a team that was interprofessional, and then my research questions started being shaped that way. The other thing about fit is, as Sarah spoke about workload, is I started to look at the committees. Like, what committees do I need to be on at Dow? Like, what service is really going to align with what I want to do with my research? So I was interested in shaping curriculum. So I wanted to be on curriculum committees. And because my work was around interprofessional collaboration, I wanted to be on the interprofessional education committees at Dalhousie. So really start to think about what you want to do with your research and what tables you need to be sitting at if you really want to mobilize your findings and you want them to translate into practice, or how you want them to translate into practice. And then the last thing I think I would share is something that I think is really, for me, and we started, and Grace talked about seeing Megan in the hallway, and I don't want to de-emphasize the importance of having people that you enjoy. So the other F word, funding, fit, and for me, it's fun. I really, truly love what I do, but I want to make sure that I'm with people who also love what they do, and that this is a hard road. Like at dinner parties, I often go around and I ask questions of my friends. No one else that I've met outside of academia, academics, experience what Sarah said is your rejection on a regular basis. And that critique that we get, and you can reshape it as positive. But it's hard when you have to get money for what we do, and we have to chase the money, and we have to publish and present. And when we don't get our manuscript accepted, or maybe the peer review isn't as favorable as we had hoped, you need something to balance that. And for me, it's working with people, and some of you are those people that we can support one another, because it's a tough road. And that really helps, in my opinion, is that you have somebody who understands and so can support you and can have fun along that journey as well. So I think that's all I had.
That's great. Thank you, Sarah, Grace, and Sherry for sharing your experiences. Like you said, a lot of complementary discussions, but I think it's easy to get bogged down in some of the harder pieces of this work. So it's nice to hear some of the positive aspects of working in partnerships and on teams and having that fun, which Sherry mentioned at the end. That's great. So now I'd love to open it up to any questions that anyone may have. If you'd like to just turn on your mic or put a question in the chat, I'm sure the panelists would be happy to answer. Yes, Kelly.
Hi, thank you very much to all of you. A lot of really good information, and I think things that will make me stay awake at night. So thanks for that. I have two main questions. Grace, I, like you, jumped into this pool later on in my journey, in my career. And so I'm wondering if you can talk a little bit more about what you mean by be flexible. Because I too have a few rigid boundaries. That's one question. The other question that Sherry brought up, and I think maybe Grace and Sarah too, was finding a mentor. And so I'm wondering if you could share with me your journey of how you chose that mentor and how you approached them. Because there are a lot of people that have guided me through my career, but I don't know if we have this formal mentor-mentee relationship, which I think is critical. And so I'd like to explore that further. Thank you, everyone.
So do you want me to go first? And so I guess yeah. So, okay, be flexible. Yes, being, like I said, coming into academics in my 40s, I was not as flexible as I should have. And so I would not recommend that. And I would recommend finding a good mentor, which I did not do. So these are the things that I think really do are advantageous. But I guess I think building on what Sherry and Sarah have said, is finding those that you can work well together and you can learn from. So I guess rather than finding a mentor, I probably found people that I could work well with and I could learn from and were fun to be with. So that way, that allowed me to be more flexible as I got more confidence in myself to then kind of say, oh, well, maybe I could work with such and such on this, even though it's, something outside of my boundary, I could do that. Or I could, give up a little, bit of what, I think this research project has to be about this area. And if it's not about this area, then I'm not going to do it. I think that concurs with what Sherry was saying, is do a lot of different applications. And you can work on teams in areas where it's kind of related, but maybe not 100% related to what you're doing. So I think that's where I would kind of add in the flexibility area, is really thinking about what is going to advance your knowledge and your ability to do the next step. So that's it.
Thank you.
Yeah, you know what, Kelly? I don't think we do it well, the whole mentor thing, because I don't know that anyone can assign you a mentor. I think you do have to find that person. And I know that I interviewed people for 2 years to be my PhD supervisor, and I landed on somebody that I said would really help me in establishing an independent program of research, but wouldn't give me hugs. Now, everybody out there who knows me knows I like a hug. And I didn't get a hug. And I wasn't really honest about what I wanted. Like, yes, I needed that, but I also needed somebody that I had a really strong relationship with. And I did have a good mentor. The reason I share that isn't that I should have picked somebody who hugged me every day, but you have to be honest with what you want from that person. I didn't know what I needed until I started to carve out where I was going. And I'm glad I waited, because, for instance, I had Megan and I had Sarah, and they were really supportive and could mentor me like in a global sort of way. and they were friends also. But when I started to go into interprofessional that realm, and Kelly, you know this well, what I realized was that I didn't have the mentor in that field. And then I wanted to make sure somebody thought my ideas were good. And your mentor also has to believe in you. So, you know, they may not just be the rock star. So I actually found people who had peer reviewed my work favorably. And I ended up having Scott Reeves, who was a guru, and like he was the master. You know, he and John Gilbert, they were the granddaddies of interprofessional education, and they became my mentors. And they did something different than like Sarah or Megan would have done. And the other thing you have to realize is that what they did was they provided connections for me in that field. And I was really clear with them, like what I needed from them. What I needed from them was to have them join my team, to be on my research, to collaborate as a co-PI. That helped me get funding. And you have to recognize that. You know, the people that are going to get funding usually are the ones that have been successful getting funding. The other thing you want to remember is that there's a teaching component to our roles as academics. So I needed a mentor who also could talk to me about teaching, because again, we're not taught how to teach, and we show up, and yet that's part of what we do as well. And you need somebody that's going to help you with that. So for me, I had a pocket full of mentors, and I had to be really clear about what they were going to do for me. And when I reflect back now on my PhD supervisor who didn't hug me, one thing she did do though, is she continued to write letters to give me like awards and new investigator awards and career awards. And she was nominating me for all these prizes that were really something I had never even considered. So she remains a very influential mentor in my life, and she could anticipate what I would need to get like tenure and promotion, for instance. So yeah, there's going to be more than one. And I guess that's all I can say.
And I just wanted to jump on top of that as well. Just to add to that point about the teaching mentor. So if any of you, I mean, I know there's some of you on the call who are trainees. DAL has some incredible teaching resources. There's a certificate that you can do. All of my team they've all done that. So PhD students, postdocs have had the opportunity to sort of participate that. I think it's, you know, I don't think it costs anything either. So looking at those things. And the other thing that was kind of coming to mind, just listening to you, Kelly and Grace, and I guess even Sherry to some degree, although she's younger, but I came into my I worked before I did my PhD, albeit I worked for a few years and I registered to do my PhD. And then I worked afterwards as a sort of a research fellow, kind of, I guess, a postdoc type job, but we didn't call it that in the UK where I was working. The other thing that I think we'll all experience is the idea of imposter syndrome. I think I just want to put it out there that I still have that, even in the, you know, so I'm kind of often held up as like, you know, I've got a 10-year Canada research chair and I've, you know, published all these papers, blah, blah. But, you know, that's a reality, and particularly a reality for women, that we often don't feel that we're worthy. And so I think what Sherry's just said about finding those peer reviewers is fantastic, because they're the people who are reviewing your work and saying that it's good work if you're getting funding. So using all those networks, and there is no one person for sure, you know, there are lots of different people, and we need to draw on our networks. Of course, that's extremely difficult in COVID times when we're not actually having that face-to-face or those hugs, but they are things I think that you know, even in this online environment, reaching out to those people and connecting with them is really important. It is all about relationships, Grace, you're absolutely right.
Thank you very much.
Justine, I saw, oh, there you go. I was gonna say, I saw your camera come on. Go ahead.
Hi, everybody. Thanks so much so far for the conversation. I think it's very helpful as trainees. So like we're kind of on the hopeful next steps of this. It's kind of a point that Sarah brought up, and I'd like your perspectives on, is when you're applying to tenure-track positions, how specific should you be with your research plan, and what, like, do you lay out your whole 5-year plan? Do you vaguely describe it? Do you describe it in detail? Like, I'm kind of just struggling with how specific to be in like the research statement part of tenure track applications.
I'm happy to kick off with that first of all. I mean, I haven't applied for a new job for some time, but I've reviewed a lot of applications from people, and sometimes you have to kind of look at what the job is about, because you're looking for that fit between you and that job, and you can usually get a sense from that job. You're like, again, what other people are doing, do your homework, look at the department, who else is working there, what other people's research plans are, and then you'll get a sense of, okay, what's mine going to be. So you'll have a general idea about where your research is going. Hopefully all of you know what the things are that are really exciting you, but you might need to tweak it a little bit for each job to sort of really fit with what they're asking for. So I would suggest that you kind of put it down relatively sort of specifically, but allow room for discussion at the time when you're going for your interview, because, well, hopefully if you get an interview. So you're really trying to sort of sell yourself based on what that department is looking for, as well as what you feel that you can offer to that department. So it's trying to kind of mesh those two things together.
I have to say that agreeing with everything that Sarah shared, you want to also, sometimes we get into the habit, Justine, that we just list, oh, these are the grants I'm going to go for. And I think that's, I mean, sure, do that, but do more than that. I think that you want to demonstrate that you have ideas. So get to know your program. If you know that your program has a priority area and you fit with that, what are you going to contribute? And how are you going to do that creatively? For me, that's a big part. I mean, and, working with Sarah and Megan, we've been very creative in what we've done and how we've attended to our research findings, that we've created workshops and dynamic, courses and programs and videos. And so what it shows is that there's breadth to what you're doing as well. So you're not just having a list of grants. You really are saying, I'm going to contribute to the school, to the university, to this program in these ways, and find out what committees there are that align with maybe what you're studying, and say, I'd really like to inform the curriculum in this course. So, and I think that what it's showing them is that there is fit also between your research ideas and your teaching ideas and your service. And you're putting that all together. You're really telling the story of you. And as Sarah said, leave it open. That story is unwritten. I mean, you're proposing a story and you're selling a story, but the story has to have flexibility because there's no definite end. And I think it's really important that, for me, reviewing applications, and I've done that, as Sarah said, probably more than I've applied for jobs. I've read others' applications. And for me, it's those people that can do that. And so maybe they don't have an exact plan and it's not laid out neat and tidy, but there are ideas there.
I'll just add a couple thoughts to that. And I would say sell yourself too. I mean, I think that get over it. You're going to have to sell yourself whatever you do. So if you can't sell yourself, you're not going to win. So you have to sell yourself on grants. You have to sell yourself for positions. You have to sell yourself to tenure and promotion. You have to find out what those things are and where you fit. And if you don't, you won't be successful. I mean, that's the reality. I mean, I've been in things where I'm like, oh yes, I'm wonderful. And they don't see my wonderfulness. But I have to kind of make them see my wonderfulness. So I think that every person who writes a grant, we're selling an idea. So you have to believe in your ideas, and you have to kind of so I would say that, we need that piece of we need to find what are they looking for and how do we fit within that. And if we don't, then just don't go for it. I guess I'm kind of a little bit well, just don't waste your time, go for another thing because that you do fit well in. Because it won't be what you should be doing.
The other thing is, and I think we're afraid to do this, but it's been a key to my success, is and students don't do this. I always say, students, let your friend read your paper. Let somebody else read your ideas and your application. That is so key. We don't do that. And the minute I started doing that, letting people see my grant application before it was submitted and being open to that critique from your friends, and maybe not your friends. Maybe they're like, actually, you know what's funny is I picked somebody, I'm not going to say who it is. Actually, I think it's funny if I do say who it is, but it's somebody that I knew would review my grant very critically. It was actually not even a grant. It was my application for promotion. And I went to this person because I knew they were tough. And I said, I'm picking you because I'm tough. So be tough. And you know what? That is so helpful. So especially what Grace just said, don't waste your time. So find out first if you're going to be wasting anyone's time. Are you clear? Yeah.
Thank you.
Great. So we're getting some questions coming in on the chat. I'll just read the first one here from Tommy. So thanks so much. I'm curious about the process of building an internal team lab with research coordinators and assistants. How does that usually go? One grant funds someone, there's a launch pad for funding for more personnel to pay across multiple grants. So anyone like to tackle that one?
Well, I'll say briefly that it's one of the challenges to being a researcher is to get a consistent team and consistent funding for those individuals. And I think I speak for everybody, is that is one of the challenges, you know, to build a team. And so, yes, you have to get funding to find those good people. And then you have to find continued funding. You have to funding with other individuals to keep those good people on. And that's that's a continual challenge to do that. So I'm just that's my little piece. I'll let other people talk.
Well, you know what else they don't teach you? They don't teach you how to teach, and they don't teach you HR, human resources. So, I mean, you have I had no idea what kind of employer I was going to be.
Oh, we lost your audio again, Sherry. Okay. Sarah, I don't know if you have anything to add to that, or.
Yeah, I think I know where Sherry's going there as well. So I think I'll not try and speak for you, but that is key. I mean, I remember the first person I hired, and they actually ended up in my lab. Not that I have a lab, but you know what I mean. Everybody uses that language in my office. They stayed with me so they came on as just out of an undergrad. They came as a research assistant. They ended up rolling into a master's. And then I hired my second person was a PhD student. So you build it around students a lot of the time. That's obviously challenging because students are transient and they will go off into another role. And so when you do manage to get a bigger grant, carve a bit of that out. Work with a colleague. I think as Sherry was sort of mentioning, you kind of, you know, or no, maybe it was you, Grace, you find somebody else who's also looking for a research assistant or a project coordinator, a manager or whatever, and you create that with them. So you're both of you paying for a small amount of that person's time. Because if you get a good project manager, you are in such a, that they are absolutely worth their weight in gold.
Karen, I do see your hand. I'm just going to go to a couple more, unless your questions about that.
No, that's fine.
Okay.
You can go through the one, Sarah, and then I can.
Okay, thanks. So Caitlin asks, I'm wondering about strategies to balance new opportunities with wrapping up old projects from postdocs or PhDs, and how you might prioritize these tasks.
So first I'll say, I know I'm so bossy, but anyway, so first I'll say that publications. So if it's going to lead to publications, yeah. And so, and if it's a new opportunity, then think hard of what you're going to get out of it. I guess that's the thing. It's like I said, some collaborations I'll always say yes to because they're with individuals that I work with and I contribute to. And so even if I don't see a clear path for myself, I figure it's my turn to contribute. But I said, so it is a balancing act. We never have time enough to get our publications out. We're always doing publications with not always, but usually without any funding. So I would say, you know, building those ideas of publications early in the process, so you're organizing what publications are going to come out of the project, is very important to getting them done. But you're always going to be going for new funding along the way. And so I do my writing usually at certain times. So if I'm going to write, I'm usually on the weekends. So I'm writing on the weekends. And and I try to balance it so I don't have to write new proposals at the same time. But you know, often the opportunity comes to us, and then that's what you have to do.
Yeah, I'll just jump in there as well on the, so this was actually my first Christmas, I think, since I started at Dow, where I didn't have a grant going in January, because typically that's the horrible deadlines are always like they're always in summer, you know, when you're trying to get a holiday, and they're always in at Christmas when you're trying to get a break. And but I did write a paper over Christmas. Now it shouldn't be like that. I would actually strongly advise you to try and carve out time. You know, I've actually started blocking out days this term around, like, this is my writing day. Do not book any meetings in that time, because I'm spending my entire life on Zoom, as I'm sure all of you are as well. And sometimes I just need that headspace to write. That I think, you know, is a real challenge. But really thinking about, okay, where can I contribute with this paper? If you haven't got any primary data, is there a commentary that you can do? Is there something that you can, you know, some paper that you can write around a very topical issue at the moment? Some of those actually end up being probably your most highly cited. And I'll give you an example. I actually, the student I mentioned, or the trainee I mentioned, master student who started as my first hire, actually in her master's program did an essay as part of her coursework, and we got it published. It is one of our highly cited papers, because, you know, she took a very theoretical or a very specific issue, and she wrote a paper about it, and I then helped to shape it into a publication. She's lead author, I'm second author, and we as I say, that wouldn't have been anything that I would have normally have done, but the idea was there. So that's where I think we really, you know, you take those opportunities when they come along. And if you have a good PhD student, a good postdoc, give them opportunities too for those other things that are maybe not directly related to their research, but, you know, again, I always try to sort of find different things that my students could write about. You know, we'd have a conversation, and in a team meeting, it's like, oh, that would make a really good commentary paper, and then we would work together to get that out. So, you know, find those opportunities to do that. And I think that also might answer Natalie's question as well, in terms of those publishing tips. You know, just keep looking for those things that would you know, count well on your promotion application.
Great. So we'll go to Elizabeth, and then to Karen, and then if any other additional publishing tips, we'll go back to Natalie's question. But Elizabeth has a COVID question. So some of the pros and cons of starting a tenure track during COVID-19, any advice on navigating these things?
Maybe try to do as much as you can without gathering primary research, I think would be one of the huge tips. I mean, what can you do? Or, you know, we can do virtual interviews, so we can do those things. And so I would say it's going to be difficult, but it's going to be challenging. But since it is about publishing, can you do a systematic review? Can you do an integrated review? Can you do things that do not mean you have to go into the field? And so I think that those are areas where you can put your energies right now, if it's not possible. So if COVID is making it so that you can't go out and do things, then there's always something that can be pushed ahead, that can be moved in our own little offices. So that's what I try to do when I'm not able to gather primary research, then I'm working on something else, and that can be done without, you know, going and gathering data.
Yeah, I think that's great advice, Grace, actually. And you know, it's the reality that we're in. You know, there's jobs coming up and they're still hiring. So I would say, you know, go for it. Look at where you can build other skills in your time that you're waiting for primary research to start, for example. You know, but just don't lose the opportunity of a tenure track position because they are also like gold dust.
Thanks. Karen, go right ahead.
Okay, I've thought of more questions while I've been listening. But my original one was about, I feel like there's lots of advice about like how to manage your time at this stage. So like tenure. And one is like, you know, the publish. So say no to a lot of things and kind of carve out your time for writing. And then the other one is, you know, say yes to everything and look for all these opportunities to be involved. And I found that hard to manage, where sometimes I'm involved in a project and it's almost like there's no time to publish because you're moving on to the next thing. And so how do you kind of yeah, kind of find the right number of things to be involved in that allows you to engage in each project fully across all those phases of involvement. You know, I do a lot of like participatory community-based research, so like the relationship building takes a long time. And anyways, that's one thing. And then the other question, I'll just put them both in there. Like Sarah Kirk, for example, you've done like really engaged on social media, and that seems to be important. And I found that also to be, you know, I played around with that a little bit, and I'm trying to understand, you know, how important that is and what role that has in your research. It seems like it's becoming really important to have this like kind of public profile as a researcher, maybe through social media, maybe by contributing to publications like The Conversation. And I'm just curious how important you think that is.
That's a great question. I'm actually presenting to a PhD in health program about the sort of how you engage the public, and this weekend. So this is very fresh in my mind because I was doing my slides yesterday. It's funny because actually, you know, I'm probably less active on social media these days, actually, because it's so time consuming, and I have more important things to do, like publish, because actually I'm not publishing very much at the moment, because as I say, my big project is a school community university partnership. It takes forever to get anything done. And I'm really anxious about my own lack of publications. Okay, I'm tenured, but you know, still there is that sort of pressure to get things out. So I'm less active on social media. Things like The Conversation, though, I would say are actually really helpful, because they're a good way of demonstrating that, and again, Sherry mentioned this, you know, your ability to translate your information to a different type of audience. And The Conversation Canada, for those who haven't used it, it's a very great way of doing that. I just was looking at my figures for two papers that I've had, or two articles that I had in there, and between them they're like 27,000 views. And the original paper that which actually is the one that Megan and Sherry and I worked on back in 2014, we had it published. That's been maybe about 2,300 downloads of that original paper that kind of sparked all those two additional items. So your impact is actually way bigger in the things like The Conversation than they perhaps would be from the original paper that you write. So you put all that effort into getting that peer-reviewed publication. But you know, if you want to look at impact, you're probably getting more impact from doing those conversation things. So I think it's a bit of both. Again, looking for those opportunities. With The Conversation, you always have to have, really, ideally, I mean, you don't have to have it, but ideally you want to have a publication out. So think about it as part of the whole kind of cycle of writing a paper. So you're doing the research, you know, got the results, you've got to write that paper to get that work out. Bolt onto that this kind of like a short knowledge translation activity as well. So you know, I used to try and do this all the time. It's less, I find it much harder now because I don't like, my research time is tiny compared to what it was in my Canada Research Chair. But in my Canada Research Chair, every paper we put out, we did a 2-page lay summary, and we would share that. So we would share that paper with the 2-page lay summary, and then we'd use that 2-page lay summary for any time we were talking to the media, or we would do little snippets and things like that. So you can build it in like that, but you know, it is hard. And unfortunately, what Grace was saying earlier, like the time that we end up doing a lot of this is in our own time, and it shouldn't be like that, but unfortunately it is. And I'm really wishing we could change that. And, you know, I would hate to keep saying to you, like, you know, work 24 hours a day, but it feels like that sometimes, especially in the early stages of your career, because you're just so overwhelmed. Yeah.
So I'll just add a little on there, just in regards to the first one, because I'm not very good with the social media aspect of things. But I would say that it's really important when you're that balancing act. You know, you get all that advice. Yes, you know, be on everything, but be careful. And I think you just have to find your own path on that. You know, that's the thing. It is. I found that in my past, you know, it has been about the relationship. So like I said, if you're on it, find those teams that you work well together and keep on with those teams as much as possible. And when you find new intriguing people that you think you're going to share something with, then start with those. But don't just be on, I guess that to me, since it is about relationships, where am I fostering relationships and where am I fostering my knowledge? So trying to be on those. At the beginning, I think I was on too many things. I would say yes, yes, yes. And then of course now I'm saying a little bit, I'm still not very good at saying no, but I'm realizing that I can't do it all. And that it's more important to maintain those relationships on the teams that I'm on. So since those teams are usually large, maybe I'm like, okay, I will say, okay, you're part of that team. So I will, go on that grant with you and then continue that. So I would say, yes, you do need to be flexible, but think about it a lot before you start, before you start to say yes to being on a grant. You may look at someone, are they successful? So they're going to help mentor you. Are they very in one area that you're going to learn from? So what are you going to get out of being on whatever you're saying yes to? So really thinking about that, rather than just saying yes to everything, but being thoughtful about it.
And just one more point to that actually as well, is, particularly for women, people of color, anybody from an equity deserving group, is you're often, even more under pressure to try and be that person who does everything, because you've already got those sort of historical kind of issues that are holding you back, or maybe holding you back. So I think it's really important to be very strategic about these things, and that's also where a mentor can help, because a mentor can actually look at what you're doing and say, yeah, this is a good thing to do, this is perhaps something not to invest your energy in, so I just to kind of really think about that as well.
I see, yeah, Sherry's still trying to connect, but does anyone have any last question? I'm cognizant of the time and I'd like to give everyone a few minutes to step away from their computers before their next Zoom call, but any final questions? Okay, lots of thanks coming in the chat. So I'll just take the opportunity to extend that sincere thanks to our panelists. This was so helpful. And I'm planning on taking this back to the center executive team and saying, can we do this regularly for different topics of mentorship? Because I think bringing us together, especially during COVID times, I know it's on Zoom, but an opportunity to have these conversations and kind of prepare us for this career track is really helpful. So thank you all so much. And yeah, I think we'll sign off there.
And thank you, Christine, for being such a good host.
Yeah. Thanks, everyone.
Take care.
Thanks. Bye.